Hello, viewers. You're welcome to another session of Broken Not Shattered. I want to thank you all for joining us week in, week out. Please, if you're joining us for the first time, kindly hit the like button and follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and TikTok. And do well to share the link with your family and friends so they can join us in the conversation. Today I'm your co-host OBG. Unfortunately, Ike is not in the studio with me, but we're going to have a great time, trust me. And in the studio with us is Felon. Felon, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself as you will want them to meet you. The mic is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you giving me this space to share my story. So, my name is Fallon Farinacci. The elder who gifted me my name, my spirit name, which is White Thunder Woman, said that I'm here to make a lot of noise. I didn't know what that really meant at first, but I feel as though I quickly learned and have stepped into that now. I am a mother of three. I'm an advocate and a speaker. And yeah, I'm just honored to be here to be able to share my story.
Thank you so much, Felon. It's great having you in the studio. Your story is one of a million that is so inspiring, and I must confess that. But before I get into further questions, can you please tell us your story? What is your story all about?
Absolutely. My 2 feet are currently planted in the Niagara region in Ontario, Canada. I didn't grow up here though. All my life, I wasn't born here. I was born out west in Manitoba in a tiny, predominantly Métis Indigenous community. It was about 300 people when I was little, and it's still holding strong at 300. It's a very tiny little community, and that's where my father and my grandparents grew up as well. I lived what you would say like as a normal life. And I say normal because I want people to think what they think is normal, what you might have a preconceived notion of what someone might deserve because they have a normal life, or the opposite, right? Just to bring that up for their own thoughts to kind of process. So there was a man in our community who I had known my whole life. My father actually knew him as well, and he grew increasingly obsessed with my mother. So much so that he started crossing some boundaries. And at one point, he threatened my mother's life, and he told her she wouldn't live to see her next birthday, and he wouldn't live to see his. My parents took that quite seriously, and they called the RCMP here, or in Manitoba. They have the RCMP for their local police. And so they called them and let them know what was happening. And they came out, they took my mother's statement, and then they arrested this man. And they brought him before a judge, but he was released the same day. And at the time, this happened in 1993, or sorry, this began in 1992, I should say. Because of that, they had to call this what you would call a restraining order, now something different. It was basically a restraining order as we might know it nowadays. Okay, so they brought him back in front of this judge. They gave him that restraining order, and then he was released out to the community. Our community is really small, so you can imagine how hard it is to avoid someone when you have a restraining order, and not to have to see someone who threatened your life when he only lives 2 little city, not even, they're like little community blocks over. Everyone knew everyone, right? So my parents continued to hear these threats that he was making. My parents had told the RCMP they were concerned he had a 22 caliber rifle when they had arrested him. Unfortunately, there wasn't a seizure of weapons. There was no search of his home. There was nothing done to ensure that my parents were safe at that time, including myself and my siblings. So my mother's name was Sherry Paul. My father's name was Morse Paul. And at the time of this, my father was 37, my mom was 36. And then it was myself and my two brothers. So I was 9 at the time. My younger brother was 5, and my older brother was 17. My parents continued to hear these threats, so they wrote the local RCMP office a letter. Why, I'm not quite sure. Was it to have something in writing, or was it because they wanted to ensure there was a paper trail, perhaps because they were feeling like they were being mishandled their case at that point? I'm not quite sure. So in this letter, my mother wrote she was concerned that her stalker had a handgun as well as the rifle. Nothing was done. The letter was never filed. They receive it, but nothing was done with it, unfortunately. And so then from there, my parents felt as though this quote justice system was not doing anything for them. And now we're at the beginning of January, and my parents' case lands on the desk of a family crown attorney. Well, this was not a family matter. This man was in no way related. This was not a domestic abuse case. So there was a lot of confusion as to why this had happened. Well, this crown took this case. So this lawyer took this case and was like, okay, I'm going to move forward with it. The way he wanted to move forward with it was to have a mediation. He wanted my mother to sit down with this man. And I'm not sure what kind of agreement you could come to when someone is threatening your life. It should have gone through criminal court, but no one knows why. There's a lot of incidents throughout my family's case where they simply state that it was human error. Just like following this crown accepting this case, there was a clerk who was in a temp position. And unfortunately, she accidentally mailed my mother all of her stalker's documents, and then the stalker got all of my mother's documents. So there was so many different errors. And at this point, my family is feeling completely frustrated, to say the least, and not as though anything is moving forward in their favor. So now the date comes when they're supposed to have the mediation. This is January 26th. And both my parents decide that they are not moving forward with this, that they want to press charges. So again, he's released out on bail. And unfortunately, just after midnight on January 27th, he comes to our home. And my older brother was awake at the time. He was expecting a friend to come over. We were all sleeping. And my brother opened the door, and unknowing to him, it was my mother's stalker on the other side of the door. So he barged into our house, and he held my brother hostage in the basement, tied up for a couple of hours. And it's not until about 2:30 in the morning that he makes his way upstairs. Thankfully, at this time, my older brother quickly escapes and runs to a nearby neighbor where he's able to call 911. Or it's an emergency number, because it's the 90s, and it's also rural area. So we didn't have 911 at the time for an emergency number. So he calls from my parents' best friend's home, Ken and Debbie Bowden. And that first call goes in at 2:30 in the morning. When he had left the house, he had heard a gunshot go off. That was the gunshot that did, in fact, kill my father instantly and awoke the rest of the home. So myself and my younger brother woke up at that point. So from this point on at 2:30, we are being held hostage with my mother in our home. My older brother calls the RCMP, and the way it would normally go for a chain of command for a call like this is you would call the 911 dispatcher, would then let the 2 officers know who are on duty at our local police station. So the closest police station for our community was about 40 minutes away. And because we're in rural Manitoba, they're covering large land and communities, like a number of communities, right? So they are gone now, actually, because it's past 2 a.m. And at this time, they closed that police station at 2. So now it's 2:30. They've made their way home to Winnipeg. Those 2 officers then have to call the next chain of command up, which would be a constable. And they would let that constable know that we were being held hostage. And they actually use my mother's stalker by name because they know him, because this man had 13 prior convictions, mostly drinking and driving related. However, they knew him. They knew him so much so that in 1990, the same police station who released him out on bail because he uttered threats to my mother, 3 years prior, they fought bail. They said that he was a danger to the community, but for whatever reason, they felt fit to release him then. So they know him by name and they say that he's in our home holding us hostage. And that constable, who is the only hostage negotiator, he has the power to send SWAT, to have more police officers come, to call another police station for backup, or himself also to get up and come out to our home to negotiate this hostage situation. Instead, he tells those two officers, go out to the Paul residence and see if you can talk to him. Have him come out and call me when you get there. And then he hangs up the phone and he falls back asleep. So he goes to sleep. While those two other officers also believe that possibly there's backup coming or there's more help coming, and they're just instructed to come out to our home. It takes so long for them to come out to our home. A second 911 call goes in at 3:30 in the morning. In this time, we're being held hostage. Our lives are being threatened because he now realizes that my older brother had escaped. My mother separates him from us, and now she has us stay downstairs while they go upstairs. Well, at 5:30, myself and my younger brother go running upstairs because I had heard a gunshot. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I tried to make my way into my bedroom. And it was at that point I heard my mother say, why do you have to shoot me? You already shot me. What I thought she said was shot me in the eye, but she had said shot me in the arm. She had been shot in the arm at this point. And so I make my way to my parents' room. That's when I discover that my father was on the bed. I thought he was sleeping, so I wasn't quite sure. I figured he was hurt because the next call I make is, again, an emergency number, and I ask for 3 ambulance because I don't know where my brother is, and I think he's hurt somewhere in the house, and I know that my dad is hurt as well, and something is happening that's really wrong to my mom, but I can't make sense of it because I'm 9 and I'm not really sure what's happening. I call again for help. This time I'm hung up on by the 911 dispatcher, and we continue to wait. We wait for so long. There is still no SWAT. There's no RCMP officers outside of our home, and it is now 6:30, and he turns the gun on my mother, and he shoots and kills my mother in front of myself and my younger brother, and then he turns the gun on himself, and he commits suicide. I don't know that he's committed suicide because he does it in my bedroom and I'm in a different room at this point. And so we're frozen in there because we're scared if we make any noise, he's going to come in. So this all happens at 6:30. SWAT doesn't arrive to our home until 7, and they still wait outside. They don't enter our home until 8:30 in the morning. And it is at that time that we're taken out of the home and we're brought to Winnipeg, which is about 40 minutes away. And we're brought to the Misericordia Hospital. That's the hospital my mother worked at. And they wanted, like, all of her coworkers wanted us to go there. I think they had anticipated that my mother would also be coming with us, but we're later all confirmed that both my parents had, in fact, died that night with her stalker. And so from a result of this, we had to move to Ontario because this is where my mother's side of the family is. And we lived here. It was really hard because I wanted to stay in my home, the only place I had ever known as my home. All of my father's side of the family is there. This was a community. Not only that, there was my culture and traditions that I would grow up with out there. And then coming here was quite different. So I fought quite hard, and I did end up moving back to Manitoba. I got to graduate high school out there, and eventually I made my way back to Ontario. And I'm grateful I did because after my parents died, unfortunately, my older brother had turned 18 within a couple of months. So he was, not to say he was left on his own, but he was left on his own as an adult. Or a legal, I should say, adult, because I have a now 20-year-old, and I can promise you there's still lots of growing that needs to happen. So I couldn't imagine my older brother, 18, just being, left without parents or any kind of guidance like that or support. Myself and my younger brother didn't receive any. We received one play-based therapy. There was no proper post-traumatic care. And then you can imagine it was the same for my older brother. So unfortunately, and a lot of people don't understand this when I say it, but at the age of 29, I lost my older brother to suicide. And that hit me harder than what I had to endure the night of my parents' death. And when I say that he passed away from suicide, I want to actually rephrase it, because I want to say that he passed away as a result of unresolved trauma due to systems that are put in place that are not supporting folks. And these systems are doing exactly what they are supposed to do, how they were designed as well. And so, yes, it was mental health, but that mental health came as a result of unresolved trauma due to these systems. And so, it was quite hard losing my brother. And then moving on throughout life, it became really important to me to share my family story. I testified for the National Inquiry here in Canada. We have I should say, not just here in Canada, across the globe, we have an ongoing epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited LGBTQIA plus folks. It is facts. This is happening around the globe to Indigenous communities. And so here in Canada, we had a call from grassroots organizations to do an inquiry into the way that the government has not supported our communities, how the RCMP is involved in this as well. My family's case clearly shows that. And so because of these grassroots organizations, there was this call for a national inquiry. And I was a part of that. And I had testified and shared my family story. And then from there, I just wanted to really continue to share my family story and to bring awareness as much as I could. And, I'm not going to say it didn't take a toll on me mentally, bringing all of that up, because I thought I was healed, not, realizing healing is very linear and it's an ongoing process. And then throughout that process, realizing myself that I had a lot of healing and reconnecting to do. Well, I acknowledge I'm very privileged because I do have a community that claims me. And there are many people who have been taken from their communities and they don't have those very, very important connections to community and culture, where I do. And it just, when I say that, it's this huge realization that my younger brother, he never actually went back to our community. He went back twice or three times, for visits and throughout the summertime. But he didn't move back and he didn't stay connected, unfortunately, the way I did. And so I do think that that also played a huge role on the toll of his mental health. And then again, there's a lot of unresolved trauma, not only from the loss of my parents, but then also the loss of my older brother. And we just had the passing of the anniversary of his death. So 2 years ago, this month, my younger brother also took his life due to unresolved trauma. And so back in 2021, I had started a GoFundMe, not for myself, but for my two communities that I claim and that I call home. And it was for two Indigenous organizations I wanted to give back to, just be able to honor my parents and my older brother at the time. Not my younger brother was still with me. And I called it the 38 fundraiser, Celebrate Indigenous Resilience, because I was going to be the first person in 2021 to turn 38 years old. And that was a big slap in the face to realize that. And then after my younger brother passed away 2 years ago, I came to the realization that he himself hadn't turned 38 either. So while I'm not alone, I'm not without. So when you hear the story, please know I have so much love and community around me. I have my husband and my 3 children, and then all my incredible family and friends that support me and walk this journey with me. I am the only living member of my family, and so I try to shift that narrative and celebrate the fact that I am still here. And so that's in a nutshell some of my story. So thank you for that space to be able to share that.
Well, I understand how it is in your heart. To be honest, it was indeed a sad story and a very sad beginning as well. I'm happy that you're healed and you have communities around you, your husband and your children with you. That's a good one to note. However, we're going to go on a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue. Viewers, you're welcome once again to Broken Not Shattered. Unfortunately, today Ike is not available in the studio. And if you're joining us for the first time, please do well to follow us on all our social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Spotify. And also share the link with your family and friends so they can get into the conversation. Thank you, President, for being in the studio with us. Your story, like I said, was quite a sad one from the beginning, and you've had your own share of the experience. However, before I go into further studio, you made mention of the system, and I wanted to ask you, now that you're grown, what do you see could be, you know, the failure, or what led to the sad incident? Was it a system failure or negligence? What was it that today you could look back and say, this could have saved my parents' life?
Good question. So in the inquiry that I mentioned, we have 231 calls for justice. So they are calls to action that we want the government, we want people like community members, we want specific departments like within healthcare, within policing, the justice system. These are all calls to action that us as family members have come up with. And they actually all came to be because of our stories. Like that's how they were called to come forward. And there's 13 of them that I can count. I'm sure I could go through and really sift and add more to that of if these were in place, perhaps we wouldn't be here. I think it's a mix of both. I think it's a mix of there's failures within the systems themselves. They are set up to work the way that they do. Unfortunately, this is negligence as well. We have Indigenous communities here throughout Canada that we say are over policed and under policed. So we have an over representation of police when we don't need them. And then we have them arriving or not arriving when we do need them. The very fact that this, first of all, I have to acknowledge this man was Indigenous as well. So there were systems that failed him along the way. And perhaps maybe if he was supported, then we wouldn't have been in this situation also to begin with. You know, he struggled with mental health and with addictions. And we know that doesn't come from somewhere. That is a part of a system. That is something that along the way was failed for him as well. And a lot of people would be deeply confused. Believe me, I'm not giving him an excuse, but I can't sit here and tell you that there are systems that fail others and that they didn't fail him, because then I would be a hypocrite if I was not saying that. I'm not giving any excuses for it. However, there was an inquiry into the RCMP's misconduct. The judge blamed my community. The judge said that our community should have done more to support my family. And one of the officers took the stand and said that only my mother knew the grave danger she was in, that she should have done more. I'm not quite sure what else she could have done, but also the insinuation that there was something else happening that she didn't want police to know about. All the blame and the blaming right there goes to show you just the gross negligence that they were not willing to face, that they had done something wrong. I truly believe that if this happened now, that there would be repercussions for this mishandling of the entire case from very beginning to end. There's 13 times that they failed, and it is just it's just undeniable. And there are multiple cases along the process of the inquiry. I met two families that have almost identical cases to mine, which goes to show you that this isn't a one-off, that this is constantly happening, and it continues to happen here, unfortunately.
Wow, I get that very clearly. However, let's move, a little away from this to, as a 9-year-old girl witnessing the unfortunate demise of your parents. How was living for you? And at the same time, what was it like losing your brother in the later years? And how did you handle things different?
Yeah, losing my parents at first, that was, you know, I think kids are so young and so resilient, and you come to terms with it in different ways. While myself and my brothers, we all went through the same thing, we also went through very different things. We're going to process things entirely different as well. We didn't stay together either. Myself and my younger brother were only together for 1 year. And then after that, we were divided, and I had to live with my grandmother and he stayed with my aunt. I would say that I fortunately got the better end of things. My grandmother was lovely and loving and caring. Well, unfortunately, later in life, realizing that my younger brother didn't have it quite so easy at my aunt's house, and the kindness was not there to the level of what I had with my grandmother. And then when we both lost our older brother, that was devastating because he was everything. I remember saying to him, he was struggling at the time himself with addiction. And I remember looking at him because he had made a comment about not wanting to live. And I didn't take it seriously. I took it seriously in that moment, but not that he was going to do anything. And because really mental health it's still not talked about the way it should be, but it definitely was not talked about even then in the 2000s, right? Or early 2000s, I should say. And so I remember looking at him and saying, like, you can't do that. And selfishly saying, you can't leave me alone. And, that just, it gutted me. I don't feel bad for saying that now because I know I was young and I was, little, and I mean, not little, but I was a young adult and I didn't know the seriousness of him saying something like that. I thought it was just him having a rough day and me saying that. And then it wasn't for a couple of years when he ended up taking his life. And so when he did, I just thought, this is it. I'm done. Like I'm so broken. And I was driving down the street and I saw someone walking their dog. And it was in that moment I realized, oh, the world keeps moving. Like it's going to keep spinning. My world is falling apart, but everything else is going to keep moving because you feel like in that moment, everything's going to stop. Of course it is. Your world's falling apart. Nothing's going the way you wanted it to. So of course things are going to pause for a minute, but they don't. And that's when I realized it. And I honestly think that is what had helped me through losing my younger brother. I mean, obviously, I'm still only 2 years into it and grieving heavily, but I do think that I was able to think that mentality right away. Like, okay, you're going to have your moments. You have to go through the grief. You have to process it, but the awareness that things aren't going to stop. And I think that helps people on their grief journey too, because a lot of times you can get down when you lose someone because you watch everyone else, quote, moving on with their life. They're not moving on. They have to. That is a part of this journey, right? And so when you realize that, you feel less alone and you feel less disappointed or let down because you realize that you have to keep going. It's that or not. So you kind of have to make a decision.
Thank you so much, Brandon. We've had a very nice time in the studio. I think our time is up. But before we let you leave the studio, I'm going to put some questions together and I would pray you're able to fix it maybe in the next 3 minutes. Permit me. So I'm going to put it this way. You've been big on healing, more especially for a generational trauma, right? And what is that advice that you will give to someone who is passing through a generational trauma? And again, what it is for you at the moment, and what you will tell to people who are passing through generational trauma, and then what you've been doing and how people can reach out to you. Just that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think it's what I would say the most to do is to go through it. You cannot come out there and to know it's going to be a lifelong journey. It is. It's not, you're not going to reach a finish line of healing. But just to go through that process. For me, the best thing to have gone through on this healing journey to have supported me has been my community. Community has been a huge part of that. So surround yourself with whatever community looks like to you and to have that support, because I honestly truly believe that that's what's going to help uplift you. And then also, if you have little ones on this journey with you, if you want to break that cycle, it's going to be this community of folks that you surround yourself with. And so, yeah, I'm just so grateful. If folks want to follow along, I'm on Instagram and TikTok, mostly Instagram. And my handle is my first and last name, so Fallon Farinacci. And then I also have my website, fallonfarinacci.com. You can follow along. I share of all the fundraising efforts that I do in advocacy and speaking. And I'll leave you with, these are not my wise words. I will say they are from an elder that once said, you can't unhear what you heard today. So what will you do now? How will you move forward with what you've heard? And I think it's so impactful because I'll take with what you've shared with me as well. And I think that's the beauty of this life and this world, is we meet and connect with people. And I think that it's done in a way that is for us to continue on, to take those pieces with us on our journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much. But before you leave, I'm going to ask you this. We have a tradition where the last guest will always have a drop-off question for the next guest, irrespective of who they are, without knowing who they are. There is no right or wrong answer to the question, so don't be scared. And before you leave, you're going to give us your own drop-off question for the next guest. So the last guest asked, in the midst of chaos, what do you do?
Oh, that's so good. I remember what the things are that make me feel good. When I am in a good place, I try to pull back at that. So whether I can do it in that moment or not, it makes me pause and it interrupts that cycle of the chaos. And I think, okay, what can you do? Because you know innately what the things are that make you feel good. So when you interrupt that with that, you have nothing but to think of that. Whether you move forward with the action or not is different, but you still stop the process in its moment of that spiraling chaos.
Interesting. So, what will be your drop-off question for the next guest?
Oh my goodness gracious. I struggle with imposter syndrome. So I'm gonna leave that for the guests. What is it that you do to pull yourself out of those negative thoughts of not enough, of everything that creeps up when it comes to imposter syndrome?
Correct. Thank you so much, Helen, for your patience and for your time and for honestly sharing your life with us and the entire public. We appreciate you. Stay close. So anytime, any day, we can reach out to you to share this video further with you. Because I believe there are other things that we would have shared if not for the limited time we have. Thank you so much for making us time to be with us. Viewers, we thank you also for staying with us through this time. And I will encourage you once again to continue to follow us on all platforms at BNS Podcast. Thank you, fellows, for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Before we leave the studio, we say peace, love, and more grace. Bye for now.